Testing 1 2. Yeah, so I thought it might be a bit of fun today to continue on with going through the alchemy video on neurobases. It's a comprehensive guide, season 3 part 2, filtering. So yeah, because I haven't caught up with alchemy stuff lately, so let's have a listen and we'll follow through. And yeah, we'll also do it on Wavetable as well. So here's what we made yesterday's stream. So the original bass sounded like this. And ended up doing the same thing on Wavetable, which sounds like this. Yeah. So we will just start in a minute. Cool. All right, let's get it going.
Hey, what's good everybody? My name is Alchemy. Welcome to the channel. This is part 2 of season 3 Comprehensive Guide to Neurobase. If you haven't seen the first part, I'd recommend that you go watch that, or what you can also do is go and watch season 2 and season 1. I don't know why I said that backwards, but today we're going to be focusing on filtering. There's a lot of stuff that I have to cover, so I'm going to try to move pretty quickly. But the key to getting good filtering out of Neurobase is really understanding a couple of things. For one of the most important things that you will get is like what filter goes where, and of course like that's
so I think he's actually starting up a new instance of phase plant here from what I can see anyway, so that we'll follow along with that as we go.
Objective, but you know, like specifically talking about like where would you place a band pass to get what kind of specific sound, or a notch filter, what makes something sound like it's talking versus what makes something sound like it's squelchy. How does it develop a relationship when you use an EQ or when you push distortion and have a relationship with filtering? And then also we can talk about things like multiband. So as you can tell, there's a lot of different things for me to look at, but before we get into that, I'm going to provide a quick demonstration to you to understand like how easy it is to actually start getting the tonalities of a neurobase. Right now I've got something that's just as simple as a sine wave, and all I'm going to do is grab a distortion unit just like this, and then I'm going to grab a filter.
It's going to notch it a bit
to duplicate this, and then we're going to duplicate this. So we've got distortion, filter, and then maybe one more distortion. So one of the key principles that we can talk about is something that I think that Frequent gave to the world, which is called sine compression. He's pretty much the first person.
Yeah, okay, so I'll just do a quick instance of this, just because he's right. It's ridiculously easy to get your generic neuro sound going on. So phase plant. Okay, let's get a sine wave. Sounds like this. Oops, no it doesn't. Yep. Little sine wave, okay. So we're going to distort it, and then we're going to filter it. We don't want to just drive it too hard immediately. Put more distortion, another filter. I think he's going with 3 distortions. So let's move that down. I'm still not super fluent with phase plant as well, so bear with me. So we set all of the filters to notches and kind of reduce the Q a little bit so they're a bit wider, and then we're going to add a randomizer. We'll put 2 on just to get some variety, smooth them out, and map them both to the cutoff. Do the same thing here to the second one. And he's right, it's a pretty easy way to get a neuro
that I've
sound
ever
very easily.
heard say something like that, and I don't know particularly where he got it from or if he made it up, but it doesn't matter. What we have now is a couple of notches here with a large slope, and we're going to automate with a randomizer where these
Yeah, cool. This is basic sine compression. Let's make the slope even more ridiculous. And I actually like it if you do that with a square wave. And if we wanted to take that further, we could put some chorus on it. And some sort of stereo thing. And let's see just how quickly and easily you can do that on Wavetable. So new instance of Wavetable, set to a sine wave, and we'll use the internal filtering system. So we'll have 2 notches, both set to 24 slopes. And both of them, because I'll keep this really simple, give them like 12 dB on each. And reduce the gain. Now we drop 2 LFOs. Or we can start with 1, set it to a randomizer once it's done its thing. Cool, randomizer. Set smooth to 100, duplicate it. Map each randomizer to the frequency. Get a final instance of saturation. Let's go a bit warmer. And we would turn that into a square. Yeah, very easy to do, but we'll skip ahead a bit.
2 kind of heuristics, and then particular characteristics are like what frequencies sound like whenever a filter is interacting with it, regardless of what kind of band it is. And by band, I mean like what different filter types. So as a quick example, if I play something that is kind of in the low mid region right here, then we can isolate these frequencies.
Okay, so now there's a band pass on one of them. Let's do that. And it'd be smarter to have the band pass go first. And if we set that to unison mode, you're going to widen it up a lot. Let's go classic. Cool sound. Anyway.
And kind of listen to how that sounds on its own. So take a listen here. Let me move this back by a significant amount. I'm also going to deactivate the resonance here.
So it's sine compression going on.
Okay, so if this were a robot, what would he be saying?
What would a robot say?
Whoa,
Jesus.
right? So we can kind of already tell that by pushing or by focusing on the low mid frequencies, that is giving us some kind of low vocal tonality. Likewise, the further that we go up along the frequency range, the more, I guess, kind of high pitch, or you can even say that in some cases, the more squelchy it's going to become.
Okay, this is an important point as well. The further up the bandpass gets, see, we'll just disable the mapping, but the further up the bandpass gets, the less bass you're going to have. So here, when we've got it really low, there's a really nice groan. Take it up. And it's actually a really cool way just to get a lot of movement. And it's actually a lot more prominent when you've got a lower like a more sine-y sort of wave shape. So here's with a sine. And the only harmonics you're getting are from the distortion. But if we set it to like a saw wave or something, you've got a lot more to filter. Cool.
So let's go ahead and sweep up. I'm going to give this a higher harmonic, or sorry, a higher pitch, so that way we can tell what this is doing.
Yeah, so he's showing here what's happening when you've got the fundamental frequency at a much higher point. Let's continue
Even if
on.
we want to maybe stack this with an octave, so that way we've got something else to cut through. And one thing that it brings up a good point naturally here is that in order for a filter to sound like it's working, it has to have frequencies to cut through. So let's give it some.
Okay, this is getting ridiculous.
And once we start, regardless of what your source is. So for me in particular, we've already kind of started developing the ideas of like what would go into a neurobase in the first place. So if I turn this on and we go and do some basic, I guess, processing to this, maybe let's say we want to turn this into a res of some sort.
Okay, how to do that quickly and easily. Let's turn it into a res. What I do like about phase plant is you can see the effects on the oscillator. It's a really good thing. And so yeah, here we've just doubled up and detuned it in wavetable. It's a little bit more tedious. You have to add a second oscillator and detune them against each other. Yeah, I'm more of a fan of using square waves for my reses generally. But you get some nice groans happening. Alright.
Maybe we want to add just a little bit of
randomization.
noise at the end, or maybe even right here. So we can hit command and go into something like noise, and you only need just a little bit because of how much distortion we have here. But
that's another point with the sine compression, is to add a small amount of noise into it. Depending what you're working with, if you're using the more Ableton native plugins, I find it's better to put in an instance of erosion. That's kind of an optional thing.
you can already see that we're starting to get there. There isn't really like, you don't have to go much further than this. However, what I would kind of particularly theorize or categorize things of where to go next would obviously to be to make the sound shine, so that's where we would get into our stereo processing and so forth, but that's for next video. So now that this demonstration is kind of complete and you see how easy it is to kind of develop something that's pretty easy, my advice to you would be to really just spend some time, grab yourself a nice chunky audio form, grab these filter types and see what these basic ones do, because there's only so many different filter types, right? And what happens is, like, whenever you have a complex filter, which we'll make here in a second, it really just becomes a combination of pretty much these to some degree. You've got some slopes, you've got some peaks, you've got some dips. It might be a variation of having a bunch of bell curves. That might be a lot of them to do like a comb filter or something. But at its...
I feel this is an important point. There aren't really that many different filters to deal with. You've got your low pass. Got a high pass. You have band pass. And you have notch. And all of the different filtering methods are just going to be combinations of those.
Its bass, you can use.
But if you're into Eurobass yourself, most people are aware of that. If you're going to be using like an EQ, you can take it a little bit further. So here, you got a few more options. So let's just turn on one. You can do really, really hard low pass or high pass in this instance. So with a ×4 slope, you can just boost a whole area, which can be really cool if you're getting like into distortion and stuff. You can completely fatten up a signal. And you can use bells as well, which is almost like a targeted band pass or a targeted notch. And then you've got proper notching. But yeah, there's really not that much you can do. And it's how you combine them. And I've got a feeling that we're going to be doing some frequency splitting here, and that will probably be important to how it all goes together.
Filters and move them in serial or move them in parallel or whatever to start to create your own filters in that way. It's just understanding how the signal flow goes. So that'll get us into the next thing. I'll talk about probably frequency splitting at the end, but let's take a look at slice EQ. And by the way, I am using kilohertz phase plant, but that's because this is, it just, oh man, it's so good. I talked about this yesterday in the last video. So let's say I wanted to get into complex filtering, right? Well, what are some combinations that we can do? The most common one from like 2012 all the way to 2016 was 2 notches and a boost. So we've got something like this, and then maybe right here we've got something kind of like this. And what these are doing is
this is going to be a very much a vowel sort of effect.
Kind of just sweeping along the frequency range. Now, thanks to Copycat, which is one of the most important things that he taught me, is that whenever you're doing complex filtering on a parametric EQ, it's working in serial. So on one end, the bands are interacting with each other whenever they move. However, it's still on a serial, like, I guess.
Serial in this context means left to right. So filter 1 goes into filter 2, for instance. And you can control that. Where's the modes? Somewhere on here. Let's open it up. Yeah, for wavetable, you can control it somewhere, but I'm not quite sure where. Maybe it's been moved. I could have sworn there was a little control for it here. No, that's so weird. That is so weird. Anyway, what it basically means is that you're getting the same effect as running through 2 filters. So what that means is if you're completely filtering out something, doesn't matter what you do on the second filter, you're not going to hear anything. Vice versa. Which means, and like one result of that is sometimes you're going to have a massive drop in volume when the filters interact.
Routing chain. So keep that in mind whenever you do this. Now, within all this stuff, the way that we used to do this was we would use something like ProQ or maybe EQ8 or maybe parametric EQ2 if you're in FL Studio, and you would pretty much automate these over time. Now, I don't do that anymore. And the reason why is because it's too much work. So because of something beautiful like phase plant, or if you have Bitwig or something that has a modulator on it, you can use either LFOs, multi-stage envelopes, or in this case, I'm going to use randomizers. We can just use these. What I can do is I can grab the cutoff of these here.
Mm-hmm.
And now these are interacting with each other. And then what I can do is I can grab the other one. And
yeah, that's kind of fun. I'll show you a version of that we can do on Ableton. So let's just leave this current setup how it is. Maybe give it a bit more bite with the oscillators. Yeah, so we've got a little bit of volume going on, but let's just do that for a bit of fun. So we'll load up an EQ8, and Oh no, we'll go with the 2 notches and 1 peak. So let's set that up. Give it a bit more room here so we can see it. And what about these 2? 2. Yeah, I'll make the peak even a little bit. No, we'll modulate the cues as well. Yeah, so what we'll do, we'll put on 3 LFOs all set to random. And just let them go crazy on the EQ8 and see what happens. So set the first one to random and give them kind of different speeds as well. So they're going to interact carefully. So the first one can control frequency of there. Second one, leave it at full speed. That can control number 2 frequency. So now they're going to be moving around however they want. Third one, set it to random, maybe like, let's make it 0.9. And make sure you set the smooth up on full, and that one is going to control this peak. And we're also going to kind of rebalance it, so we're controlling the cues as well. But we don't want the cue to be controlled by the same frequencies. Let's let them kind of be a little bit more random. So let's have a look. Yeah, better use limiter as well. And actually that's just generally you should use limiters, but let's have a listen. And if we change the pitch bend to something ridiculous like 24, this is just through randomization of the filters. Actually, I'm going to drop the maximum resonance of all 3 of these so we have a bit more decent cue slicing. Bring it all down. Let's try now. It's actually kind of cool, especially if you've got a randomizer controlling the pitch. That'd be a bit of fun. It's a bit of fun doing that.
To some place. It's where now all of these are interacting in some cool, unpredictable way. Not really concerned about what it's doing right now. And even if you are cutting this too much, or let's say like this is cutting out a lot of the low end right here, you can always move this over. You can always move this to some different place as well. Maybe I want this to focus on those low mids like I was talking about. And then maybe for this one here, I want it to do something different. But what we can also do is we can make another randomizer, and we can start to make this be really dramatic by pulling the resonance up and down in this way.
So it's just mad filtering at this stage. Kind of like what I'm doing with the wavetab. Though, let's be strict, make sure it's all signed, and drive it like hell, 24 dB. Let's give it some unison as well, just to make it as obvious as possible. That's just random filtering with distortion, so we're getting a lot from it. Okay.
So hard, and then
Get
use
the idea.
Want to, and I encourage you to experiment. But it doesn't stop there. There's more that we can do. One idea that I want to pitch to you, which is one of the coolest features about Phase Plant, in my opinion, is the fact that with the slice EQ, we have a mix function. So let's pretend that like this is doing too much. Let's pretend like it's cutting too many of the sounds or whatever.
Okay.
And at some points, we want it to actually have a little bit of the original character. Well, the reason why this is so cool is because we can use another randomizer.
It's not a bad idea, actually. We can do that via scale. So if we set it to 0, we're not getting any boosts. However, the notches are doing their thing. But at the moment, yeah, that's a better way to do it. So when scale is set to 0 on EQ8, what it's doing is it's turning off any of the plus or minus gain controls. So when it's set to like a high pass filter, for instance, or a low pass, it's still doing complete cutting. It's only doing its thing otherwise. So now we've got random when it's boosted. I love the stereo effect. Love Max for Live. Before I was using Max for Live. To do this would take so much effort. My God, it would.
Macro or any other modulator to mess with the mix. So that means that at certain points it's going to cut a lot of the sound out, and at certain points it's going to allow the entire chunky wave minus this processing, of course, to kind of bleed through or to kind of play through the whole thing. So take a listen to that.
Cool. So that's where we're at now anyway.
Okay, sweet. So let's say that we wanted this to do even more. One quick thing that you can do to try to like just play with some ideas is to take another randomizer like this and add just a little bit of pitch drift to this at a slow rate, because what's going to happen is that's going to make it sound like it's kind of like, for lack of better description, like in.
Okay, that's a bit of a funny one, adding pitch drift to it. So where can we do that? Here. I know if we were doing that on, what do you call it? If we were doing that on analog, it would be really easy, but I don't think pitch drift is that easy to affect on wavetable. But we can do it the hard way, and the hard way is to set up an LFO, give it like 12.5% depth, because we don't want too much to be changed, and control the detune of both of them with that. And to keep the slight variation, have the second one be modulated by a different amount. That's cool. It's crazy just how hard the EQ8's boosting it. Yeah, it's a bit of fun.
Pain or something, right? So if you set this to a really slow rate and you turn up the jitter, take a listen to that.
Pitch drift, Jesus. Okay.
On top of each other. And that's one thing that I think is really important to...
Yeah, Yeah, I think everyone's familiar with this. What's cool is that Alchemy is using all of these different randomizers to essentially get a constantly evolving sound without having to like manually automate everything, or to make a single patch where you only get one kind of sound. I think that's like a big thing for his more later work.
To remember whenever you're doing this kinds of stuff is that there's always a relationship between the effects that you stack on. And while it's important to explore and like you gotta obviously have to figure out this stuff for yourself and like do your own work of being like, okay, well, how does this work with this? When you keep that in mind, then essentially like you can start to build any kind of sound out of any sound, right? Any characteristic of like electronic digital processing, I would say, because you can't necessarily just make something sound, you know, like somebody is singing or something. Like with enough processing, you can get close, but I guess I wanted to just make sure that the right mindset is out for that. But if you're trying to turn something into a bass or you're trying to turn something into a pad, that's more so what I mean, as opposed to, you know, you can make something that sounds like a taxi completely sound like something different. There's a lot more legwork that goes into that. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, he's right there. Especially if you want to go really granular, you can take any sound you want. For instance, let's load up an instance of sampler. I'll show you what I mean. Let's pick a random sound. What have we got here? Just want something that will make the point.
Children growing, women producing.
That'll do. Cool.
Children, children, children.
Yep. That's what we'll take. So we're loading that into sampler. And if we loop it, you can regard it as an oscillator. And once you start looping it fast, look at that. We've taken this little sample of a voice, going children or whatever, and we've got a pretty cool little and hell, we could turn that into a kick drum by using a filter, and we want to drive it as well. And if we then go to the pitch, give it some extreme pitch envelope. And cool. So we've almost made a kick drum from it. Yeah, check it out. Taken that sample and we've turned it into a oscillator. It's almost like the intro to Lateralis. Bit of fun. Okay, let's continue on.
I just wanted to be clear on that. Within all this stuff, if I were to turn everything off, whenever you guys are doing these kinds of processes, again, it's really important to be mindful about what frequencies you're boosting and what frequencies you are, how do you say, either cutting or whatever. We talked about the vocal cord thing, or a distortion unit or a drive type, and you can start to get, and that's kind of getting into that really cool sound that I did a speed run on earlier in the year. So what we can also do is maybe mix and match these different distortion types.
The non-linear filter is a good one. Okay, let's continue on a little bit further.
And it's not just that you use something like a
So
factorator.
we're talking about essentially getting more randomization happening here. Bok, bok, bok. Doggo going off there.
The sort. And that's going to ultimately lead you towards having a better understanding of pass here, which pretty much does all the work for us. So in regards to filtering here,
Okay.
it's
I'm going to stop it here because we're up to like multi-band splitting, which is honestly going to be the important part of it, I think. But the takeaway we can have here so far is listen to what just using 2 notches and a peak has done. That's a cool sound, but very cool. That'd actually be really good for a drop. Yeah, let's try putting some delay on that. I actually don't like how hard that's peaking though. It'd actually be a bit of fun to just get like a randomizer going. Let's have a look. So let's kind of play with the chance a bit. By using the chance control, we can inject some randomness in. So let's do that. Okay, doing the chance fairly low, except for a couple of the notes. Let's see how that goes. So by setting the randomizer up this way, notes will sometimes change, but not always. And let's also drop in some erosion there, just because like if we're doing it this way, we might as well do it properly. So you want to put the erosion before the main filtering, so it's got some noise to cut out. Drop some OTP. Fatten it up, make not such a fan of the whistly sort of sounds though. I think it's a little bit on the nose, honestly. But that's just kind of my attitude towards it. Gonna leave it there and we'll continue on this video later on. Great, thank you very much for watching. A bit of a